I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing this out for some kind of online advice forum, but after everything that happened, I guess I just need to get it off my chest. My name's Mike, and I was with my wife Lisa for 10 years before I found out she'd been cheating on me with our son's private tutor of all people. If you told me a year ago that I'd discover something like this, I wouldn't have believed you. We seemed like a normal couple, maybe a little stressed, but who is? We had a nice house, a good life. Then I started noticing small things that didn't add up. It all started a few months back, after our son, Jake, started going to this new tutoring service. Lisa was always super busy with work, so I figured she was just stressed or distracted. But then I started noticing she'd come home late more often than she claimed, and her phone would be glued to her side. I'd catch her sneaking quick texts in the bathroom or at dinner, and she'd get defensive if I asked about her phone. She'd brush it off, saying she was just talking to her boss or some client, always some excuse that sounded plausible but didn't sit right. It got worse when she started canceling plans with friends, saying she was too busy. I thought maybe she was just overwhelmed, but the real kicker was the tutoring sessions. I knew Jake's tutoring was supposed to be just an hour or two after school, but I'd noticed the sessions sometimes stretched way longer. And Lisa, her attitude changed. She'd get snippy if I brought it up, roll her eyes, say I was paranoid, or accuse me of not trusting her. But I could see the way she'd come in late, look tired, and her stories didn't always match up. Something just felt off. One evening, I decided to check the nanny cam we'd installed in our bedroom. It's not like I wanted to catch her doing something, but I was getting paranoid. I set it up with the intention of just keeping an eye out, maybe catching her sneaking out or talking to someone. I never actually thought I'd find something so damning. That night, I kept it running as I was falling asleep, half expecting to see nothing. Then, around 10:30 p.m., I saw her. Lisa slipped into our room, and what the hell, she wasn't alone. There was a guy with her, and it was our son's tutor, David. They weren't just talking, it was more than that. The way they touched, the way she looked at him, it was clear they weren't just friends or casual colleagues. They were doing something I really didn't want to see. I froze, just watching the monitor, my stomach twisting. It wasn't just a quick kiss or a hug, there was real intimacy there. It was sickening. I couldn't believe it. The woman I married, the person I trusted with everything, she was cheating with a guy who was supposed to be helping our kids succeed. And the worst part, it was happening right in my own house, in our bedroom, during our supposed family time. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. All the lies, all the sneaking around, she'd been lying about everything. I couldn't sleep that night after seeing that. I kept replaying the footage in my head, trying to understand how I missed the signs, how I was so blind to what she was doing right under my nose. The next morning, I woke up feeling numb. I was furious, heartbroken, and honestly, feeling a little stupid for not catching on sooner. I kept asking myself how she could be so manipulative, so dishonest. I knew I had to confront her, but I had no idea how she'd react. Part of me wanted to tear into her, to scream at her for betraying everything we built. But then I thought about how she'd probably lie her way out of it, how she'd spin some story that made her seem innocent or justified. I knew I had to be ready for her bullshit because I wasn't just mad. I was furious, betrayed, and hurt to my core. I kept the footage saved on my phone just in case I needed proof later. I was planning to confront her that very day, but I also knew that whatever she said, nothing would undo what I saw. Still, I needed to see her face, hear her words, and get some kind of clarity. I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay, not after seeing that. I was about to blow everything wide open, and I had no idea what would happen next. If I tell you the truth, I still don't fully know what I'm going to do. The betrayal cut deeper than I ever thought possible. I loved her, at least I thought I did, and now I was faced with a choice I never imagined I'd have to make. That day, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a train. My stomach was tight, my head spinning from the shock of what I'd seen. I kept staring at the footage, watching Lisa's face, her sneaky glances, the way she touched David's arm like he was more than just a tutor. My mind was racing. I wasn't just hurt, I was angry, and I knew I had to confront her. But how? What do you say when the person you trusted the most has been lying to your face for months? I decided I couldn't just tiptoe around it. This wasn't some petty disagreement. It was serious and I needed answers. I waited until she was supposed to be at work. She'd claimed she had an important meeting, and I waited until she left the house. Then I grabbed my phone, pulled out the footage, and started preparing myself. I knew the truth now, and I couldn't pretend anymore. Had to get her to face it. When she came home that evening, I was sitting on the couch, calm on the surface but boiling inside. She walked in, looking exhausted, her hair a little disheveled. As soon as she saw my face, I saw the flicker of guilt, but she tried to mask it with her usual bitchy attitude. "What's your problem, Mike? You look like you've seen a ghost." I didn't even waste time with small talk. I pushed the phone toward her, showing her the footage. "Tell me what the hell this is," I said sharply. Her eyes darted to the screen, and for a second she looked genuinely surprised. Then she scowled and started her usual bullshit. "That's not what it looks like. You're overreacting. It's just a stupid misunderstanding." I stared at her, feeling a mixture of disgust and disbelief. "Misunderstanding? Are you kidding me? This is our bedroom, our house. And you're fooling around with David, our son's tutor. How stupid do you think I am?" Her face twisted into something ugly, like she was trying to convince herself that she hadn't just betrayed everything we had. "You don't understand. It's complicated. I was stressed and he's just helping Jake with his homework, that's all." "Really? Helping Jake?" I repeated dryly. "You two were practically naked in this footage, Lisa. You looked like you were about to fuck him. You think I'm that damn stupid?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. She started to lie again, spinning some story about how she was just comforting him, how they were just talking, how I was paranoid. But I wasn't buying it. Not anymore. I felt my chest tighten. I'd always known she could be bitchy, that she had a sharp tongue and a tendency to throw insults when she was angry. But right now, it was like she was a stranger, a person I didn't recognize. I couldn't believe I'd spent 10 years with someone capable of this level of deception. It was like something out of a bad soap opera, only it was real. The worst part, I knew I'd never see her the same way again. We argued for what felt like hours. She kept denying everything, calling me crazy, accusing me of invading her privacy, saying I was mistrusting her for no reason. "You're just paranoid because you're insecure," she snapped. "You think every man is after me, but I'm not. You're overreacting. You need to grow up." Her words stung worse than I thought they would. I'd always prided myself on being a reasonable guy, but right now I felt broken. I wanted to believe her, I really did. But the footage didn't lie. Every time she spun her excuses, I felt more like I was talking to a stranger. It was as if I was watching my wife turn into someone I didn't even recognize. I kept replaying the images in my mind, the way she touched him, the way she looked into his eyes like she might actually want to follow through. All I could think about was how betrayed I was, how I'd trusted her with everything. Our son, our home, my own heart, and she'd been lying right to my face. I felt cold, numb even, but inside I was raging. I wanted to scream at her, to shake sense into her, but I also knew I needed to keep my composure. I had to figure out what I was going to do next. She finally stormed out of the house after dinner, muttering something about how I was ruining everything, how I was crazy for believing I could control her. I didn't care about her excuses anymore. All I knew was that I'd seen enough, and I wasn't going to pretend this was just a phase or a misunderstanding. It was real. It was ugly. And I was furious. That night, I sat alone in the dark, staring at the footage on my phone, trying to process what this all meant. I knew I was at a crossroads. I didn't want to lose my family, but I also couldn't ignore the fact that my wife had crossed every boundary I ever set. How do you forgive something like that? How do you move past it? I didn't know. All I knew was that I needed to think, and I needed to decide whether I was going to fight for her or finally walk away. The next few days were a blur of anger, confusion, and disbelief. I kept replaying the footage in my head, trying to understand how someone I loved could do something so brazen, so completely devoid of respect or decency. Every time I looked at Lisa, I saw the same bitchy attitude she'd always had, sharp and dismissive, like she was just waiting for me to slip up so she could tear me down. But underneath that, I saw something else, fear. I saw guilt. I saw a woman who knew she'd been caught and she didn't like it one bit. I didn't want to be the guy who jumped to conclusions. Hell, I wanted to believe she was innocent somehow. Maybe she'd just been overwhelmed, or maybe it was a one-time mistake that she'd regret forever. But the evidence was staring me in the face, and I couldn't pretend anymore. I kept asking myself how I'd missed all the signs, how I'd let her manipulate me into thinking everything was fine when it clearly was. I decided to give her a chance to explain herself. I called her into the living room that afternoon, my heart pounding. She looked at me with that same smirk, like she didn't think I'd actually have the guts to confront her. I held up the phone with the footage and said, "Lisa, I need you to tell me what's really going on. Because I saw this and I can't just pretend." I want the truth." She rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. "Look, Mike, you're overreacting. That's not what you think it is. You're reading into it too much. I swear nothing's happening. I was just trying to help him, that's all. You're making a big deal out of nothing." I felt my blood boil. "Nothing. You were practically in bed with him, literally in our own bedroom. You think I don't see what's happening here? I saw how you touched him. I saw how you looked at him. And you expect me to believe this is just some innocent help?" She scoffed, her voice laced with venom. "You're insane. Just because I had a moment of weakness doesn't mean I don't love you. I'm sorry I hurt you, but I'm not some manipulative cheater. You're making this into a bigger deal than it is. Maybe you're just jealous because I'm attractive and he's a younger guy. That's your problem, not mine." That hit me like a punch. I couldn't believe she'd turned it around on me like I was the one at fault. Jealous? Seriously. I'd always been faithful, always tried to do right by her, and now she was calling me insecure. I almost burst out laughing, but I held back. I knew I had to keep my cool, even if every fiber of my body wanted to scream at her, to shake her and make her see how much she'd betrayed me. I told her to leave the house for a while, to give me some space to think. She huffed and shot me a nasty look, but she finally stormed out, slamming the front door behind her. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty doorway, feeling a strange mix of relief and heartbreak. Part of me wanted to call her and beg her to tell me the truth, to confess she'd been unfaithful. But another part of me knew the real truth. This was bigger than just some flirtation. It was a breach of everything I thought was sacred. Over the next couple of days, I stayed pretty isolated, trying to process everything. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I started questioning everything about our life together. Had she ever really loved me? Was I just some placeholder, someone who did his duty but never truly mattered? The anger simmered beneath the surface, but underneath that there was a deep sadness I couldn't shake. I felt like I'd been sucker punched, like my world had come crashing down. I kept thinking about our son, Jake, and how this whole mess was going to affect him. I didn't want him to grow up thinking that cheating and lying were normal. I wanted to protect him from all of this, but I also knew I had to protect myself. I didn't want to be some sucker who got played like a fool. I started considering the worst-case scenarios. What if she didn't stop? What if this was just the beginning? Could I forgive her? Could I even stay married to someone who had crossed so many lines? By the end of those days, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I was tired of feeling like a fool. I needed to know where I stood, and if she'd keep lying, I'd be the one to call the shots. I knew I had to prepare for the worst, but I also knew I couldn't just pretend everything was okay anymore. I was hurt, betrayed, and furious, and I was about to do something I never thought I'd do. The confrontation I'd planned was looming, and I knew I couldn't put it off forever. The more I thought about what she'd done, the angrier I became. I didn't just feel betrayed, I felt humiliated. All those years I'd been trying to give her everything, and she'd been sneaking around with some kid who was supposed to be helping our son with his homework. It was sick. Honestly, I started feeling like I didn't even recognize her anymore. By the time I got to that evening, I'd made a choice. I was going to confront her face to face and get some damn clarity. I wasn't going to let her spin any more lies. I wanted the truth straight from her, no bullshit, no excuses. So I called her and told her to meet me at the house. She hesitated, I could tell from her tone, but I didn't care. I told her it was urgent, and she finally agreed, probably realizing I wasn't going to back down. When she arrived, her face was already set with that bitchy, defiant look she always had when she was about to start some crap. I felt. My fists clenched, but I kept my voice steady. Lisa, I need to know what's really going on here. I've seen the footage, I've caught you in lies already, and I'm done playing games. Are you sleeping with David? She rolled her eyes, huffing like I was some idiot wasting her time. God, you're so paranoid. You really think I'd cheat on you with that kid? That's disgusting. You're just trying to make me look bad because you're insecure. I shook my head. No, Lisa, I'm not insecure. I'm furious because I saw you in my own bed, touching him like he's more than a tutor. Don't bullshit me anymore. I want the truth, or I swear to God I'm done. I won't stay married to someone who lies and betrays me like this. She crossed her arms and snorted. Fine, you want the truth. Yes, I've been talking to David, but it's not what you think. I was just lonely, stressed out, and he's been there for me, that's all. Nothing happened, I swear. It's just sexless. It's just emotional support. You need to get over yourself. My blood ran cold. Her words were so casual, like she was telling me she was just having a casual conversation with a coworker. I could see through it. I saw how she looked away, how she hesitated, how she was desperately trying to convince me she wasn't guilty. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I'd seen what they looked like in that footage, how they touched, how they kissed. That was no emotional support. That was something else entirely, and she knew it. The worst part, despite everything, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she'd tell me the truth if I pushed hard enough. Maybe she'd finally admit she'd crossed a line. But deep down, I knew better. I knew she was just trying to cover her ass, lie her way out of this mess like she always did. That's when I realized that no matter what she said, I couldn't trust her anymore. I didn't want to stay in some half-assed marriage built on lies and betrayal. I told her straight up that I was done. That I couldn't do this anymore. Couldn't pretend she was innocent when I'd seen the truth with my own eyes. I told her she could stay or go, but I wasn't going to be the fool who stayed and got played. I wanted her out of my house, out of my life if it came to that. She started crying then, not because she was sorry, no, that would be too easy, but because she was angry, throwing insults, calling me insecure, pathetic, jealous. You're just jealous because I still look good and I can still get a man to want me, she spat. You're not enough for me anymore anyway. I deserve better than some guy who's too stupid to see what's right in front of him. That was the moment I realized I was done trying to reason with her. I told her she needed to leave. She kept arguing, throwing a tantrum, but I stood my ground. I called the police for some help, not because I wanted to press charges, but just to make sure she didn't do anything crazy when she left. She stormed out, shouting that I was overreacting, that she'd never hurt me, that she'd never cheat. But I knew better. I'd seen her in her real, ugly truth now. After she was gone, I sat in the silence of the house, feeling a strange mix of relief and devastation. I'd taken the first step, finally confronting her, finally facing the reality of what she'd done. But it didn't make the pain any easier. It made me realize how much I'd been blind for so long. I was furious, yes, but I was also heartbroken. That night I just stared at the ceiling, replaying everything. What do I do now? Do I try to fix this? Do I forgive her? Or do I cut my losses and move on? Honestly, I don't have all the answers. I just know that I can't live like this anymore, that I deserve better than a wife who lies, cheats, and manipulates her way through our marriage. I feel broken, but I also feel like I've finally taken control of my life again. It's going to hurt for a while, but I know I'll get through it, one way or another. The days following her departure were some of the hardest I've ever experienced. The house felt emptier than I thought possible, and the silence was deafening. I kept replaying everything, her lies, her sneers, her dismissive attitude, and I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of loss. I'd loved her for so long, built my life around her, and now I was left with nothing but questions and a hollow ache in my chest. I tried to keep myself busy, but nothing worked. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of her clothes still hanging in the closet, her perfume lingering in the bathroom, the bed she'd betrayed me in. My mind kept circling back to the footage, to that sickening scene in our bedroom. I couldn't get it out of my head. I'd thought I knew her, trusted her, and now I felt like I'd been played for a fool. I reached out to a few friends, guys I'd known for years, and told them what happened. I needed someone to talk to, someone who could give me honest advice without bias. Most of them were angry on my behalf, telling me I deserved better, that she was a piece of shit for cheating on me with a kid who was supposed to be helping our son. One of my buddies, Dave, said something that stuck with me. You gotta decide what's more important, holding onto the past or protecting yourself for the future. That quote kept echoing in my mind as I sat alone in the house, feeling like I was at a crossroads. I knew I couldn't undo what she'd done, but I could decide how I was going to move forward. Part of me still wanted to try and save the marriage, to believe her weak excuses and hope she felt remorse. But the other, louder part knew that trusting her again was a gamble I couldn't afford to take. I also spent hours digging through her phone, her emails, anything I could find. I wanted to know if there was more to this. Was she seeing him before, during, or after those documented moments? I didn't find concrete evidence of that, but I could tell from her messages she'd been lying about a lot. She'd always been good at hiding her true self behind a bitchy smirk, but now I saw her for what she was, a woman capable of betrayal, deception, and petty lies. Her departure also made me realize how much I'd been putting up with for the sake of our family. All the little signs, her dismissiveness, her sneaking around the late nights, were warnings I'd refused to see. I'd convinced myself she was just stressed or busy, but in reality she'd been sneaking behind my back right in our own house. That realization was a punch to the gut. I kept asking myself how I'd let it get this far, how I'd been so blind. The thing that hurt the most was thinking about Jake. He was only 8, so he didn't understand everything yet, but I knew this was going to shake his world. I didn't want him growing up thinking that lying, cheating, and sneaking around were normal parts of marriage. I decided I'd be honest with him, age-appropriate honesty, because I wanted him to know that Daddy wasn't some fool and that sometimes grown-ups do terrible things but they have to face the consequences. I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay in this house with her anymore. I needed distance, space to think, to breathe. I contacted a lawyer about what my options were, figuring I'd start the process of separating or divorcing. I didn't want to rush into anything, but I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. My pride, my dignity, whatever you want to call it, was on the line. I refused to be some cuckolded fool who let her walk all over him. In the back of my mind, I kept replaying the footage, her in our bed, touching David, her face full of shame and lust. That image haunted me. I'd trusted her so deeply, and now I saw clearly how little she cared about that trust. It was like she'd been living a double life, and I was just collateral damage. I wondered how long she'd been planning this, how many times she'd looked at me with fake affection while secretly sneaking around with that kid. As I sat there alone in the silence, I realized I had a choice. I could let her ruin me, or I could pick up the pieces and rebuild. It was going to be a long road, probably the hardest thing I'd ever do, but I was determined not to let her get away with it. I owed myself that much. I'd be damned if I let this betrayal define me, but I also knew I'd carry the scars forever. I just hoped that one day I could look back and say I did the right thing, even if it hurt like hell. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal consultations, emotional upheaval, and painful realizations. I moved out of the house, not because I wanted to escape my problems, but because I knew I needed space to think and to heal. It was the hardest decision I ever made, leaving behind the home I'd poured so much into, knowing that the woman I loved had betrayed me so completely. I still remember the day I packed up my things, feeling like I was walking away from a life I'd built with hope and trust, only to find it shattered into pieces. Living separately was brutal. Every day was a reminder of what I'd lost, but it also brought clarity. I saw her for what she truly was: selfish, manipulative, and willing to betray her own family over some fleeting moment of excitement. Her calls and texts became less frequent, and honestly, I felt a strange sense of relief each time she faded further into the background. I no longer had to see her bitchy smirk or hear her dismissive voice. I finally felt like I was starting to breathe again, even if the pain still lingered deep inside. I poured myself into my work, took long walks, and spent as much time with Jake as I could. That little boy was my anchor, my reason to keep going. Despite everything, I made sure he knew how much I loved him, how much he mattered. I didn't hide the fact that Mom was going through some tough times, but I promised him that we'd get through it together. Watching him grow, seeing his innocent smile, reminded me that I still had purpose, that I could rebuild my life one step at a time. The legal process was complicated but necessary. I fought for custody of Jake, knowing that his stability was my priority. It was a bitter battle, especially knowing the betrayal I was up against, but I was determined to do what was best for my son. Throughout it all, I stayed firm. I refused to let her manipulate the situation or paint herself as the victim. Deep down, I knew I had done the right thing by ending things and walking away. It hurt like hell, but it was the only way I could regain some control. Looking back, I realize I've learned a lot from this nightmare. Trust is fragile and can be broken in a second. Never ignore the signs, no matter how small they seem at first. And most importantly, I learned that standing up for yourself, even when it's the hardest thing you'll ever do, is worth it. I could have stayed, tried to forgive her, but I knew deep inside that I'd be fooling myself. Some betrayals cut too deep, and trying to move past them isn't always possible. Now, I focus on rebuilding my life. I'm more cautious about who I trust, but I'm also more aware of my worth. I won't let anyone treat me like a fool again. That experience taught me that sometimes you have to lose everything to find out who you really are. And though it's been a painful journey, I feel stronger for it, wiser. To anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, my advice is simple. Listen to your gut. Don't ignore the small signs. And if you find yourself betrayed, don't be afraid to walk away, even if it means breaking your own heart. You deserve honesty, respect, and love. Don't settle for less. Because in the end, life's too short to be with someone who doesn't value you. I may have lost my marriage, but I gained a clearer sense of who I am and what I deserve. That to me is worth everything.